Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the Vince McMahon docuseries on Netflix. This 6-part series features episodes that run for about an hour each, totaling 6 hours of compelling content. For this review, I'll be taking a podcast-style approach, so feel free to play the episode as we go along. I hope you enjoy this in-depth look at the docuseries, and I'll be discussing it even further during my live stream tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Warning: this docuseries will mention abuse, sexual assault, drug use, and more. Please be advised.
All right. So now we're on the episode of number 6, the finish. And they decided to start this thing off with Vince and essentially him telling you how he thinks. He says he likens his mind to 2 to maybe 3 computers, and it causes him to have a difficulty being able to focus. He says he has one computer that's focused on what he's saying and what the interview is asking. And then the other computer is focused on something else. And then you have the other computer that is thinking of something completely different and processing it. And so the interviewer, he goes on to say that he doesn't like it. He wishes he was normal, but he said that's just not the way that it is. You're different, be different, and fuck the world. So um, the interviewer says, well, what is the other computer thinking right now? And he says they're thinking about having a whole lot of fun, and it has something to do with sex, which was very ominous. And it lends a lot of credibility to his insatiable need for sex, the possibility of these allegations by these women being true, which I do believe all of them are true, because he is someone that cannot take the word no. And he will do everything in his power to get what he wants, especially because he wants it. Um, the depravity that Vince McMahon has when it comes to sex and power and control is nothing short of a trauma reaction from what he didn't get as a child, what he required of himself, what he felt he deserved, and what he needed. That all became to be exacerbated as he got older and the more successful he became, and how business no longer filled that need, that satiable appetite that he had. He switched off from business to sex, and it seems that's how he's been fulfilling himself over these years, which is quite sad. In this documentary, after they go to that, they switch off to the storyline where Vince McMahon was supposed to be dead. Vinnie Mac was supposed to be dead, and they had pitched a story like, you're having a midlife crisis, and Vince McMahon was like, well, how about, I die? And they were like, all right. He goes out there, cuts this very somber, odd promo. I remember I watched that episode. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then he walked past all the wrestlers. They were all lined up back there. And I was like, is he leaving? Is he like retiring? Like this sounded like a very somber retirement, right? And then he gets in his car and the fucking limousine explodes. It blew my mind. I said, is he dead? Did they just kill this man? And I'm like, no, they couldn't have killed him. They couldn't have killed him. And they pushed this like next week we're having a memorandum, like a memoriam for Vince, yada yada yada. We're doing it. And I remember Stephanie cut a promo and was like, we're gonna find out who did this to my dad. And she cried and she was like, I love you, Dad, with voice breaking and shit. And then that weekend, Benoit murdered himself and his family. And that Monday, instead of the culmination of this big story, we got the tribute to Benoit. At the time, no one knew what was going on. And we didn't find out until later that Benoit was the culprit who killed his family. And WWE had put on a tribute. Like, it made it look like WWE knew and they just, glazed over it. And that wasn't true. They had no idea. This confirms what Dark Side of the Ring said. They said they didn't know, and they didn't. They didn't know what was going on. The authorities kept everything under wraps until they released the information while the tribute was going on Monday Night Raw. Is when they released the information about Benoit dying and him murdering his family. It's very, very, very scary situation. I was just like, I can't believe that he did this. And instead of the media, instead of them doing their due diligence to truly flush out how this could have happened or why this happened, they went to what WWE was known for scandal wise, which is steroids. They went to the steroids and was like, it was roid rage that killed his family, and he killed his family under roid rage. And that just simply wasn't true. And there was no correlation between the steroids and what happened with Benoit. Benoit killed his family and himself because he suffered from CTE. And the murders that he committed and the way that he was suffering, especially after Eddie Guerrero died, he he just he went off the deep end, and he took his family out in the worst way possible. It was horrific. I've never seen or heard anything like that before in my life. God have mercy on their souls. But this was a big thing where they started to double back to the steroid usage. And at the time, John Cena was massive. John Cena was a huge man during that time. So I know he was taking steroids. Triple H was massive, huge man. I knew he was taking steroids. Like, most of those guys that had those extremely muscular physiques, right? Really big, meaty, muscular physiques. Those guys were taking steroids for sure. Like, there's no way. The only guys I know for a fact weren't taking steroids were people like Bubba and Devon Dudley. Um, People like Jeff and Matt Hardy. They weren't on steroids. Edge and Christian weren't on steroids. As far as I know, Mark Henry wasn't on steroids, even though he was a massive man. Big Show wasn't, as far as I know. Um, well, he didn't need to be. He was just big ass, big meaty man. Um, like certain people, there was a different dynamic going on in the E during that time, and there was kind of a shift in what a professional wrestler could look like. Sometimes they looked like John Cena, where they were really big and cut and muscular and big, meaty men. And other times they looked like Billy Kidman. They were tiny, small, very quick, nimble guys, but they weren't huge, massive men, with a lot of muscles. So the steroids thing was a little bit of a weird angle, but it seemed like they latched on to it because WWE already had a scandal with it. And two, it was the easiest route to take because they didn't necessarily know what was going on. So they started to report off of what could have happened rather than what did happen. As the show is progressing, I'm about 11 minutes into episode 6, and they're talking about Chris Benoit and the CTE situation. Vince McMahon essentially was just like, it's a work when you're in the ring, and we make it look like there's a lot of damage being done. We slam our head. It looks like we're slamming our head, and then we make a lot of noise. And you know, so then they bring in the neuroscientist, and he used to be a wrestler. He had a character. He was a Harvard graduate, and he got a concussion, and that concussion ended his career. And he decided to, research brain injuries because he knew that they had some correlation to the way people were aggressive, depressing. These behaviors were directly correlated to the brain trauma that people suffered with concussions. Concussions are blows to the head You can sometimes have a starry-eyed look in your eyes. Your eyes are glazed over. You can't remember anything. The brain is injured so bad. It's a traumatic event that requires time and patience to heal. But over time, if that type of trauma continues to happen to the brain, it then can no longer heal itself and it just starts to turn to mush. And this is where you have the brain rotting and the situations of where people are innately aggressive. They are, depressive. The depression sinks in. They have their personality and who they are as a person completely shifts to violence, anger, aggression, and it's uncontrollable for them. The neuroscientists, once Benoit's situation came out, the neuroscientists rightfully assumed that he had CTE. He looked at Chris Benoit's brain with the blessing of his father and found that Chris Benoit's brain was severely damaged, and he was, you know, not himself when he committed these atrocities. It's not a way to absolve him of the behavior or of the things that he has done. When I'm talking about this, I'm referring to him as Chris Benoit, the man before he got CTE, did love his family, but the CTE is what caused so much pain and suffering for him, his wife, and his son. And he was no longer who he was when they married him, when they made their son. Like, he no longer was that man. And Stone Cold Steve Austin is a very old school guy, as is Hulk Hogan. They don't believe in CTE or any of these things because they feel like, I've never gotten a concussion, so it never happened to me. And it's like, yeah, but you've had to have both of your knees worked on. You've had to have, you know, you had to have surgeries to correct your backs. You had to have arm surgeries for your arms being messed up. Like, you were injured. So it's odd that you would say you don't believe in CTE, but you believe in the pain that you suffered from wrestling and slamming your back on that mat 7 days a week. You believe in the hell you went through running around with Mr. McMahon and everything that happened backstage and in front of the camera. You believe in all of that, but you don't believe in the fact that a man's brain could be rocked so many times that it literally has collapsed on itself and it cannot function the way it normally would. And now he has become a shell of his former self. That is something that you can't believe in because you can't see it and you can't touch it. It's an ignorant way to look at things. And just because it doesn't exist in your mind doesn't mean that it doesn't exist at all. So shame on you, Stone Cold Steve Austin, for first of all, being an ignorant hick and being a fucking idiot. That's the first thing. And secondly, Terry, you can go straight to hell because you don't believe in a lot of things. Like how your hair is gone and that damn rag you keep tying on your head is only the only thing holding that 613 track that you keep putting in the back of your head is that rag. If somebody touch you wrong, your hair is falling off. Sir, just go bald like the rest of them. Shawn Michaels did it. You see, Triple H did it. They look fine. We don't give a fuck about you anyway. You could be out here bald with no beard, no mustache, no hair. We don't care because we don't like you. But Stone Cold, you tripping, okay? CTE is real. Football players have Football players have been suffering with concussions and CTE for years, and nobody took them seriously. And then Junior Seau kills himself and requests that his brain is studied for CTE and concussions. And they found out that he did have CTE. This is a real disease. And for you to act as if it doesn't exist just because you simply didn't suffer from it is odd when you yourself have gotten a concussion from wrestling in the ring. You admit it. And you can say all day long, oh, it's a work. Like, he didn't really hit his head. I don't know about you, but jumping off the top of a cage, leading with your head onto the mat, it don't matter how you do it. There's no protective way to protect your head. You can't protect your head from that. You just can't. Like, there's no way to stop yourself from bouncing off of that mat. There's no way. There's no way. And he was leading with his head often. And not to mention, y'all was busting each other over the head with chairs. Y'all conveniently forget that, but that was happening. Now I'll give Stone Cold Steve Austin one thing. If you're suffering from concussions, you're probably doing it wrong. Now I wouldn't say that. I do think that carelessness can cause concussions in the ring. I do think that you being lazy and not doing your part can cause concussions in the ring. I.e., what happened between um what happened between Undertaker and Goldberg when they wrestled over in Saudi. That was irresponsible. That was lazy. So somebody ended up getting hurt because of it. You feel me? But that's not the only way people get concussions. You know what I'm saying? Clothesline somebody and you don't fall right, concussed. You out in the ring, you supposed to fall out the ring. You fall out the ring and hit your head on the mat. You can get concussed. You get thrown into the barricade and don't protect your neck and your head, you can get concussed. When people are swinging you into the barricade or spearing you, you can bust your head on the floor. You can get concussed. These are all circumstances of moves, or rather, these are all possible outcomes when moves are executed that could also result in you hitting your head and being concussed. Do not listen to these old farts and get yourself fucked up. CTE is a real disease. It is not something that you can just not believe in. That's the same thing with you motherfuckers that don't believe in COVID. COVID is real. These things are real. I've gotten COVID before. I've been sick as a dog with COVID. And the residual viruses that have come off of COVID, I have also gotten sick. And I'm vaccinated. Okay? Child, this shit is not a game. Y'all gotta stop acting like this shit is hocus pocus and people don't believe in it. You want to go out there and die in the middle of the world like that, and do you. But don't try to drag the rest of the world with you. Don't do that. Keep your bullshit conspiracy theories to yourself. After campaign that Chris, the neuroscientist, went on and was talking about this particular situation with Benoit, Vince kind of was like, he kind of took it as a dig on WWE, and he was like, this guy is killing us. And he's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, what's happening? And he's like, you know what? If you can find credible evidence to support what you're saying, we will help. We will help you and we will figure out a way to stop this from happening again. If you have the evidence to support what you're saying, which Chris did. He had the neuroscientist evidence to support it. He had everything to support what he was saying was true. So Chris was invited to explain what CTE is, what the concussion symptoms were. They implemented a concussion protocol. They stopped doing certain moves in the ring. And this pissed off some old school guys like The Undertaker. He's like, you're going to take away the chair shot? How can you take away the chair shot? It's a staple in our industry. This is how we tell stories. And then he said something that really irritated me. He says it's a publicly traded company. He's appealing to advertisers, and he has to have the integrity and the well-being of his athletes at the forefront at all times. And essentially, it was what was best for business. So my problem with this statement is that it doesn't focus on the athletes. Without athletes, without the superstars, there is no WWE. So the forefront should always be the well-being and health of your superstars. It should never have to come to this. You should always, always, always put them first. I don't understand why that is so fucking hard. If you're running a business, right? And you're so busy worrying about keeping things the old school way that you really don't want to make sure your business thrives and expands. And as a wrestler, you should be more concerned about maintaining the business itself within the new world that it's operating in. And on top of that, you should care more about the wrestlers, their health, their well being, and the longevity of their lives, especially when your ass is still lucky to be here and you have suffered from concussions your entire fucking career. Especially when you have watched other wrestlers, older and younger than you, die because of this business. It's the audacity of you to sit there and know that these people sacrifice their lives, including you, putting your body on the line, getting hit with a Mack truck week after week after week. And the only thing you can say is that the advertisers want you to put your wrestlers and their well being first. And this is what's best for business. No, the health and wealth of the people is what's best for business. You put them first always. Always. When you don't do that, you dehumanize them. You make them objects. You make them inanimate, which means you don't care about what happens to them. And that's wrong. That pissed me off. They're talking about the deaths of the wrestlers dying young. Guys like Eddie Guerrero, the British Bulldog, Tess dying at 33, and then Benoit dying before they hit 40. Some of these deaths were circumstantial, right? From what I understand with Eddie Guerrero, his death was a culmination of his heart giving out. He was a heavy drug user before he got sober, and he died of a heart attack. And he knew he was going to die of a heart attack because of the hell he put his body through before he decided to get sober. But then Tess died of a drug overdose. Um, British Bulldog died of an enlarged heart. And it was from natural causes because he had an enlarged heart. Um, you had Owen Hart. Owen Hart passed away, and it was an unfortunate accident when he died. Owen Hart was 34 when he died. Like I said, Eddie Guerrero died of heart failure due to his past drug and alcohol abuse. When Vince was questioned as to whether he had anything to do with that, he did not take any responsibility for the deaths of these wrestlers, and they died so early in their lives. He, pretty much was like, some people they were taking steroids, they were taking drugs, they were taking uppers, they were drinking, and it was just a dangerous cocktail, and the heart just didn't know where to go, and they ended up passing. There's an old interview where the guy pretty much asked him if he takes any responsibility for the deaths of these wrestlers dying before the age of 40, and he was like, "No, I don't take any responsibility for that." And the guy just kind of looked at him like, "Are you serious? Like, how can you say that?" And Vince got defensive. Like, it was very mocking. It was very disrespectful to the guys who put their lives on the line for him and that company. And for him to say he doesn't take any responsibility for it is fucking nuts, because the trauma that you are putting these wrestlers through, they're wrestling 7 days a week. They're putting on house shows and live television shows. Some of these guys don't get to sleep. They're not eating. And to maintain themselves, maintain their money, maintain their position, because you made it seem like the entire world had to fight for that spot. And to keep it, they had to keep fighting or they would be replaced. You made it seem like everybody was replaceable, like nothing was worthwhile until you proved you were worthwhile. And you had to prove you were worthwhile every time you stepped through that curtain. So they had to stay awake. They had to keep themselves together. They were under a lot of pressure. And when you're under a lot of pressure, you do things to maintain some semblance of stability. And oftentimes people turn to drugs because of it. Your biggest stars were on drugs as well. Scott Hall was a big drug user. Matter of fact, he was more of an alcohol abuser. You had a lot of people who were on pills. for you to not take responsibility for the environment that you curated is very, very selfish. And it's a little bit ignorant. No, it's quite ignorant because you know full well what you put people through. The way you treat your children, the way you behaved towards Shane McMahon is a very, very big looking glass into how you would treat people who you don't love and who are replaceable to you and who are definitely not somebody who you gave two shits about. So I can about imagine the amount of pressure and the disrespect and the way you made people feel like they weren't worth the time or the effort, and that if they didn't put forth an effort, they would be replaced. So I know for a fact that these people were doing their damnedest to keep themselves alive in the company and wrestling 6 and 7 days a week, house shows, slamming your body on mats. You do need to take some responsibility for these people's deaths. You do need to be held accountable because whether you like to believe it or not, you were part of the catalyst as to why they lived the lifestyle that they lived. After the fallout of the questioning of wrestlers dying young, Vince and the company did start to implement changes to focus on the healthcare of the superstars. Instead of them wrestling for 10 days straight and then having 3 days off, they changed the schedule so it was severely reduced, where they would wrestle for 4 days and have 3 days off. Um, they have concussion protocols, like I said before, that they've implemented that will allow them to monitor them better. They had a drug policy that they monitored, and they would pay for rehab for superstars even after they left the company, which that is still there to this day. And they have improved on making sure the mental health and physical health of their superstars is at the forefront. And if people need time off, they can get time off. They're not forced to do anything. They have a little bit more leniency now than they did when Vince was in charge. And things are rapidly changing to adjust to the new world that we live in, but also to protect the superstars, their health, and their well being. WWE decided to shift and go back to the PG and go to a PG era style of wrestling. And that was due to the fact that the world was changing again and the fans wanted to have a more family oriented show, but there was those fans who were upset that Vince McMahon was changing the product to something that was funny and no longer, the hardcore, crude, disgusting programming that it was. And and Vince ultimately did what he thought was best for the business because advertisers aren't going to want to advertise while you've got half naked girls in the ring. Advertisers don't want to advertise their companies or associate their companies with that because they're trying to appeal to families as well, which is why you see more family oriented advertising during those years. And then in 2016, the storyline was The Authority that was still going. And Vince reared his head to give an award to Stephanie McMahon. And Shane made his triumphant return after being gone for 7+ years. I remember that night. I remember it vividly. I was sitting in my room watching it and I hit the roof when Shane's music hit because Shane was always the anti hero to Stephanie's villain. He loved it. And I loved Shane. I always thought Shane was the coolest sibling of the two. But I like Stephanie more than I like Shane when they were at odds. I loved when they were at odds because they had a really cool dynamic of siblings. But I did like Shane because I felt like he was the rebel of the family. He did what he thought was best for himself. And he went out and did things for himself. And now that I find out that he really didn't want to go. This was something that he loved and he really enjoyed, and he was kind of pushed out, you know. That's even more hurtful for me because I really did love Shane McMahon being there. I enjoyed his character just as much as I enjoyed Stephanie and even Mr. McMahon. I really did like Shane, and it really breaks my heart that he didn't get the respect or the love and admiration that he deserved until he left. And he said that when the crowd responded when he got it, when he saw the millions of people, well, the hundreds of people out there just screaming at the top of their lungs, welcome back, welcome back. It's loud. It was rambunctious. It was crazy. And he said he still gets goosebumps to this day. His voice was breaking while he was talking about it. And he was like, it was nice to be able to come back, you know, to something that you love. And I feel so bad for him because I feel like if Shane McMahon would have gotten the opportunity to get in to WWE the way he deserved, they probably would have progressed a lot faster and there would have been more, a lot of people probably could have been saved, is my point. And I feel like a lot of things could have happened a lot faster than what they had been happening. It should not have taken Triple H taking over WWE in full for things to go where it is now. I feel like they could have progressed to this moment with WWE being on top again a lot faster with Shane and Triple H working in tandem at the helm when Vince McMahon decided to step down, which I feel like he should have stepped down years ago. Shane's story in this particular part of the doc is so harrowing and telling because it really does make you feel for him. Because all he ever wanted was his father to respect him and to just let him know that he was proud of him and that he loved him. And he didn't get it often. You know, Vince had a very hard upbringing. He was very cold sometimes. And when it came to his son, he did not know how to express the love for his son. He didn't know how to do that because he wasn't given that. He didn't have it to give. All he knew was to teach him how to be a hard, masculine man. And in part, what he did was the sins of the father was now brought onto the son. But luckily for Shane, he had a mom who was nurturing enough to get him where he needed to be. And the idea that this was a boy just wanting his father to trust him, to love him, and to give him the respect that he's fought so hard to earn. And it took him 7 years away from home to come back and put on one of the greatest matches in WrestleMania history for him to finally get, I love you, son. I'm so proud of you. And I respect everything that you've done. He says, Vince says that he feels like he said he should have said it sooner, but he says he's always been proud of his son. He's always been proud of his son because his son has always blazed his own trail, has always done what he needed to do to stand out because he was a rebel in his own way. And he didn't allow anybody to tell him how he had to be or what he should be. He made his own way. He found his own path and he was able to do that. And his father was proud of him because of it. But he didn't tell him until after he damn near killed himself on top of a cage fighting one of his greatest creations. It took all of that for you to just simply say, I love you and I'm proud of you, son. That made him cry to see his son go out there and put his all out there in the ring. And then he's sitting there as a grandfather watching his grandsons, you know, hug and cry with their dad. And that struck something with Vince. And he finally gave his son the accolades he definitely deserved, rightfully deserved. And to play devil's advocate, like I said before, Vince did not know how to nurture his son. He didn't know how to do it. He didn't have it. He figured, I'm fine. I got myself together with it. You'll be fine too. But like I said, luckily enough, Shane had a mother who was competent. She was emotionally intelligent. She was nurturing. So he had something to fall back on. He had some form of love to fall back on. And that's the good part. But I am glad that he finally got the respect from his father that he rightfully deserved, that he earned more times than one. He earned that respect. The superstars, well, after Shane's return, um, and everything that went down with that. They had a moment where, like I said, the authority was there. Women's revolution happened. New superstars were built and created, and everybody came in and was ready to rumble. And then there was the uptick. WWE's stock soared. Um, a new rival was on the horizon. AEW was created, and it was created with a vice president named by the name of Cody Rhodes. And then 3 years down the line, Cody joins back to the WWE. CM Punk shows up almost a year later, and WWE seems to be rebounding and pulling itself up. The WWE Network was created earlier on, which was revolutionary streaming service. There was nothing like it on the market at the time. And to be honest, it was one of the best streaming services and one of the best ways to watch wrestling, period. No streaming service that has ever housed WWE has come close to the perfection that the WWE Network was. It made it easy for you to watch PLEs and to go back and watch old programs and products. Nothing was cut out, nothing was shaved down, nothing was destructed because it was too much for TV. That's what WWE was, and they left it like it was and put those archives up for us to see. We watched it for $9.99 a month, and it was perfect. We loved it, still love it. And I wish whoever created the WWE network would then work with Netflix so we can watch the network. In case they drop this deal with Peacock in a year, I wish the WWE network would come back, or at least some iteration of it would come back, because it was such an easy network to watch shows on, and you could watch it by chapters. They had it set up by chapters where you can go to specific matches where you didn't have to sit through entire shows that you didn't want to see, or storylines that you didn't want to see. If you just wanted to watch one specific storyline, they had it marked off by chapters. They did the PLEs like that, where they marked it off by chapter. So you didn't have to sit through matches that you didn't want to watch. And that was the fun part. You could find all the old Raws, SmackDowns, everything. You could find everything. I miss the WWE Network. I miss it. Then they asked Mr. McMahon if he would ever retire. And he said, no, I would never retire. He said he doesn't understand why people retire. He said people retire because they're like, okay, we're going to retire. He's like, so what are you going to do when you retire? He said, I'll never respect that. I'll never understand that. So if you want to retire, go ahead and die if that's what you want to do. I'm like, God damn. It ain't a death, Vince. Jesus Christ. The allegations came out. And because we are all well versed in these allegations, I'll keep it short and sweet. They asked Hulk Hogan if he thought the business would survive without Vince. And his slow, ignorant ass said no. Boy, could you be more wrong. The business was being stifled because of Vince. That's one thing in this documentary I don't think they're talking about. The business was stifled because of him. His old antics, his outdated ways, and his old head way of thinking was killing WWE. It was choking them out. And Triple H had the ideals, and he had the modernism to be able to push WWE in the direction that it needed to go. I do think that he has some flaws of his own, but his counterweight, Shawn Michaels, took over NXT and was able to revive NXT to what it needed to be, a true developmental talent creation that is rolling out superstars like a machine. WWE is going to more than survive without Vince. It's going to flourish and it's going to thrive. And you're going to be on the outside looking in like you always were, Terry, because you don't deserve to be there. Because your loyalty was never to the business. Your loyalty was to yourself. And that's the fucked up part. And I think that the selfishness of you and Vince McMahon was what was killing the business from the beginning. But, what do I know? I'm just a lowly fan watching the show. As this episode progresses, they talk about Vince selling to Endeavor and how originally he essentially ousted his own daughter, and Stephanie is the one who urged him to leave in the beginning and retire. He got antsy. About 7 months later, he pops back up, invokes his controlling interest in the board, removes the people who asked to vote him out, puts new people on the board that are on his side, and he returns to being the chairman and CEO of the company. And Stephanie resigned because of it. Stephanie hasn't been back in the East since Vince came back. And I think that she was very upset by that, but she wasn't going to show any, she's a McMahon. She's Vince's daughter. She's not going to sell, you know. Triple H stayed on board. He became head of creative. And then you got this situation with Bruce Pritchard. Bruce Pritchard is here and he's mad and he's like, they asked him, hey, have you seen some episodes of the doc? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, well, what do you think about it? He says, oh, I thought they sucked. Yeah, all right. And he was like, well, what did we miss? He was like, oh, it was your way of trying to make Vince look bad. Like, how can we make him look shitty here? How can we make him look shitty there? The reality is, he was like, he said, was there anything that we missed? And he said, yeah, the human side. And the problem with that is that was because of Vince. That wasn't because of Netflix. Netflix isn't the one who didn't show who they really were. Netflix isn't the one who was manipulating people while he's talking to them. And Netflix wasn't the one who couldn't allow people to see who they really were. That was Vince McMahon. So if you're mad about how he was portrayed, then be mad at the man who didn't show who he really was. Because he said it himself. I only want you to see what I want you to see. So if he looks shitty, then blame the man, not the network. Then he goes in, he's like, oh, well, he got Linda McMahon the best care because she had a 4-year life expectancy with cancer and he did everything he could to save her. And that was 24 years ago. Kudos. I'm not going to shit on that. But that's what he was supposed to do. He's her husband. If he loves her, he'll move heaven and earth to protect her, which is what he did. Congratulations. But you loved her enough to make sure she survived, but you didn't love her enough to keep your dick in your pants. You didn't love her enough to stop having affairs on her. You didn't love her enough to respect her as your wife and uphold her feelings and the way you make her look in high regard. You couldn't do that. But you want me to be upset because the documentary doesn't portray Vince McMahon as if he's amazing. He's this beautiful man. Bruce Pritchard, yo Humpty Dumpty on the wall looking ass got to get your shit together. Because if you don't fucking stop worrying about how people look at Vince McMahon and protect your ass, as big as it is, you gonna fuck around and find yourself in the hot seat too. In the end, they asked the question to a lot of superstars of what Vince's legacy would be. Nobody could answer that question except for Tony Atlas. I think Tony is probably one of my favorite people on this particular show, or rather this docu series, because he was unapologetically truthful. He didn't try to sugarcoat things. He didn't try to lie. He told the truth about his own behavior, about how people acted and perceived each other in the WWE, how the men behaved toward the women, how, they, in retrospect, they did what they did for the sake of the company, but not only for the sake of the company, for the sake of the business. Tony was just very, very honest. He was very, very matter of fact. And I can appreciate that because he took accountability for the shit that he did wrong. And he understood that. So he was one of my favorite people in this docuseries. But they asked the question about Vince McMahon's legacy. And this docuseries takes you through a wild ride. And I disagree with Bruce Pritchard wholeheartedly about the docuseries. I don't like the fact that he was so angry about it. It just leads me to know that the nerve that they hit was good nerve because they told the truth. I don't like the fact that he acted as if Vince McMahon was just painted as some evil villain. He wasn't. He had enough time to be able to clear himself and at least present himself as a man who had emotion. He chose not to do that. That's something that he chose to do on his own. So you can't get mad at the people for just showing the people what he wanted them to see. If you want to be mad, get your big ass up and do something about it. You tried to make him look human, but he doesn't want to be seen as human. He doesn't want to be portrayed as somebody who's human. So how can you get mad at them for not giving you something that you believed you deserved and wanted? He's a human being. That's what you guys missed. Oh, so when we asked him questions about him being a human being and showed him and asked him to express himself as a human being, and he chose to be a robot and give a very corporate bullshit answer, that's our fault? No, no, no. Blame your mans. Okay? Be mad at your mans. But to go back to the question, what is Vince McMahon's legacy? I think at his core, his legacy is he takes big risks and he loves the massive rewards that he gets for it. He is addicted to the business, the feel of it, the smell of it, the highs and lows of it. He's addicted to it. He's addicted to the success of it and how well he can continue to evolve and continue to shape and mold the stars of tomorrow. He's addicted to the creative and how he can come up with the concept in his mind and it come to fruition on screen. His legacy is going to be a master class of how you can roll through the toughness and the negative aspects of a downfall of a business where most people probably would have tucked their tails and run. He's a master class of how to you pull up your pants and you keep on trucking. You keep on pushing. You change in order to present something that you know people want to see. He's a masterclass in a late mover advantage and how you can up the ante, but also be better in your late mover advantage. But he's also carrying a negative side to that legacy. And the negative side is his need to exert control over those who he feels is lesser than him. His lack of empathy and love and respect for his children and the people around him, his dog eat dog mentality just completely absorbed and just destroyed, almost destroyed his family. In terms of his son, luckily he had a sister and a mother who loved him dearly, where he didn't turn into a fucking monster because he could have, but he didn't go that way. And then in terms of his daughter, I mean, the moment that the allegations kind of died down and things were going back to normal, he chewed her ass up and spit her out. And she just didn't want to be a part of it. She was done. She was like, look, you can have it. I'm not trying to fight for it. It's over. And she left. She was like, well, I'm out of here. And I don't blame her for that either. I feel like in her case, she deserved to be able to run WWE just as much as Shane McMahon did. I also feel as though when you're talking about changing and moving in a position where things can now be in a better place for everyone, you got to learn how to roll with the punches. And Vince's biggest problem is that he didn't feel like things would work out. But then on the back end, he would do something that somebody suggested. And because he did it, now it's a good idea. I think that his legacy on the negativity of how he treats women, how he views women, his views on sex, and all of that is all encompassing. It's all a part of who he is. And unfortunately, the negative and the salaciousness of his legacy is always going to outweigh the good that he did. The only legacy that should be relevant to you is what you believe matters. If Vince McMahon's conduct and his disgustingness towards the women in the WWE and the women that he had forced himself upon, hurt, and disrespected, if that legacy overshadows and overrides what he has provided in terms of entertainment, then I fully understand and respect that. Because sometimes you cannot separate church and state. If you feel that his legacy is the WWE, and without him, there would be no WWE, I can respect that too. In my mind, I don't love the WWE because of Vince McMahon. He was never of my concern. Did I know that he was the one who was creating the things that I saw? Of course. But he's not the reason why you love WWE either. And you can try to preface it that way and, rationalize it that way. And you can fight and argue with people about it all day long. But that's not the reason why. You love WWE for the characters, for the stories, for the emotion that it invokes. You love WWE for the escapism, for the pastime that you get to enjoy. You love WWE because of what it provides in terms of entertainment. And for me, you can create a character, but it has to be portrayed correctly. And without those superstars, those men and women who are sacrificing their bodies every single day, those men and women that are portraying these characters for you to be able to latch on to, whether you love them or hate them, there is no WWE. So while you can credit Vince with the creativity and the creation of the WWE, there's a whole other sector of WWE that deserves a lot more praise, accolades, and respect. It's up to you what you decide in terms of Vince's legacy is. Me personally, I can respect what he's done in terms of creating this company and allowing me to be able to have a place where I can escape. And I can also despise what he's done in terms of how he treated his wrestlers. The work ethic that he embodied was piss poor and disrespectful. The way he treated women, they were expendable to him. His own wife was caught in the crossfire. And the way that he felt this business was put above all else, I can't respect that. Now, like I said, I can respect what he's done in terms of being a great promoter, building his business, being cutthroat, and making changes that he felt was necessary. I can respect that. But everything that he's getting now, he deserves. And I hope Janelle Grant gets every fucking penny that he has put, everything he put that woman through. I hope she gets every penny of that money that she's suing him for. I hope she gets every minute of it. And I hope he does decide to go to court and fight it. Because all it's going to do is blow out everything that he's done to this woman. He knows that she has all the receipts. He knows that she has everything. This is just a powder keg that's just waiting to blow. And I hope she blows the doors off that bitch. He did it to himself. Instead of him going and getting help for the sexual deviancy, for the improper behavior towards women, his hatred of women, because there's no way you can do what was alleged in those lawsuits and not be a deviant and not have the type of need for control that he has. There's no way that you can view women as human beings and care for them and love them while still treating them like garbage. There's no way that you can do that. The things that's alleged in this lawsuit about her and what he did and how he pimped her out to other men in this company is disgusting. But like, it's disgusting. It's wrong. And I've never seen or heard anything like this before in my life. And like I said, I hope that she gets every penny of the money she's seeking. I hope that it destroys him from the inside out because he deserves it. He deserves it. Yes, he was one of the most important figures in wrestling history, but he is just that, history. And now it's time to progress and move forward. We are currently in the Triple H era. Superstars are happier. They're able to take breaks. They're able to go on vacations. They're able to spend time with their families. People are allowed to be able to exist, create families, build families, and actually live past 40 without having to make obligations to be paid, fight for slots on TV. There are many opportunities that people can be afforded. It's not a perfect system. No one said that Triple H's WWE is perfect, but it's better than it was. And it's not cutthroat. People are allowed to be themselves, and nobody's asking you to stick a dagger in their heart so they can take over their company because it doesn't need to go that far. Y'all, this documentary is long. It's tedious. I've been in this room for 2 days watching this documentary. Half of this stuff I knew, some of it I didn't. I honestly wish I didn't know it, to be honest with you. But I will say that despite what Bruce Pritchard says, the documentary was well balanced. The documentary did not just portray Vince McMahon in a bad light. And the doc really isn't meant for us, those of us who have been around WWE for a while, who've existed in the wrestling community and know majority of these stories, whether you know the lore of them, pieces of them. Some of these things I had no clue about. So some of this stuff was news to me, like how they was able to do the first WrestleMania and how they got WrestleMania 3 into one of the largest venues of, in the nation at the time. Some of these things I didn't know, and some of this stuff was really cool to learn. The other stuff, I mean, you got to take the good in with the bad. And in this documentary, they balanced it. They didn't just go in and was like, yeah, Vince McMahon is a freak, which, to be fair, we're not talking about the good version of being a freak. So they're right. If they were going to say it, I would be like, yeah, that's true. But they made sure to balance this doc out with Vince McMahon in his own words, the words of those around him during the times that they were reporting on. And then they gave you the words of the dirt sheet guys who've been facilitating these stories throughout the years, guys like Dave Meltzer and Shoemaker. And then when it came to the lawsuits, they brought in the Washington Post, the Washington news. They got in New York Times, Washington. They brought in the Washington Street, the Wall Street Journal, and then they brought in all these different journalists to report on the things that they reported on and to talk about what was said. It was a very matter of fact, straightforward documentary. This last episode was not supposed to finish with this accusation of Ms. Janelle Grant and the lawsuit she filed. The lawsuit was filed during the filming of this particular documentary, which up until now, Vince McMahon was okay with. But as soon as the lawsuit got filed and Janelle Grant's part was added into this episode 6 because he refused to finish filming after the lawsuit dropped. He didn't film anymore. He was supposed to finish out the doc for the last episode. He chose not to. And if you notice, Triple H was no longer filming in this particular episode. And you notice Stephanie wasn't a part of this episode either. If you notice, a lot of the doc, what they recorded for her happened in like 2021, early 2022. You didn't really get much from her after that because she was gone. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell y'all. I done did all the legwork for you. So y'all can listen to me rant and rave about it, and then have your own discourse about it and watch it and get your own feel of it. But I'll say there's two parts to the Vince McMahon's legacy. One of them is being a shrewd, cutthroat businessman who would cut down his own son to maintain himself at the top of the mountain. No matter what, at the end of the day, the business was all that mattered. Everything else came second. Family, wife, his own well-being, everything else came second, and business came first. And then you have the side of him just being salacious, a sexual deviant that really didn't come from nothing, so he don't know nothing. And instead of him going to getting help from the trauma he suffered through sex and through violence, he in part decided to blast that trauma onto other people, which caused a lot of people who had mental health issues to suffer from suicide, like Ashley Mazzaro, and then people who were being paid off to keep them quiet because he didn't want to have to go through a lot of the drama he went through before with the lawsuits. But all that shit came back to bite him in the ass. And now we're here with him being gone, which thank God, and everybody questioning what his legacy will be. At this point, the decision is yours. But for me, he's always going to be Mr. McMahon.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more wrestling content. Check out our merch and consider becoming a member for exclusive perks, special emojis, and members-only content.